Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm an e-learning evangelist here at eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about 10 Adobe Illustrator tips, and this webinar will be recorded. We'll send a copy out to all registrants via email. We'll also get the recording posted on our blog later in the week. To talk about the 10 Adobe Illustrator tips, we have with us today Nic Brown, our Head of Design and Development. Thanks for joining us, Nic. We're glad to have you with us. As you guys have questions that you want to bring up to Nic, use the questions panel. We've got that open, and I'll be pulling questions from those from there to field for Nic. So do use that as you have questions. Just so you know, one of the things we like to do after the webinar is try to follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time we do want to touch base and find out if anyone needs some one-on-one clarification about our webinar topics after the fact. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Nic, and I will make you the presenter.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for those who are on this call with us. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We see it, Nic.
Okay. So everybody knows I am using Illustrator CC. And I'll be on a Mac. I will try to tell you some of the keyboard shortcut keys that I use as I go through. And if I don't forget, I will tell you what they are on the PC as well. So I'm just going to get started. Most of these tips are fairly basic. I'll mark things. But you can take them to the next level and do some pretty complex things. So for tip 1, select shapes with same fill. Why I would use this is if I have a lot of layers or a lot of shapes in my design that use multiple colors, and I decide that maybe I don't like this blue color here and I want to change it. So for this pattern, it wouldn't be that hard just to go through and click and select each one of these if I wanted to change the color. But a faster way would be to highlight one of them and then go up to select, same, fill color. That's going to select all of those shapes that have that same fill color for me, so I don't have to go in there and manually choose each one. Now I'm going to go over and change this to be my fill. And let's say maybe I want this to be more of like a purple color, and then I can go in here and change it, and you can see it will change all of those colors, all of those shapes that have that same color. There are a few other options with this as well. Like you see, I have this shape here that has a stroke. You can see right here. And I can go up to the same option and go to select, same, stroke color, and that will select all of those shapes that have that same stroke color. So again, I can go through and choose a swatch that I have up here in my swatches panel, or I can manually choose the color that I would like, and just you can see how that would work. Just change this to be more of a greenish color. Deselect, you can see that changed. So that's really handy when you have a lot of shapes happening that have the same color that you want to update. Then moving into tip 2, it's the same sort of idea, but this uses a global color. Now, a global color is a swatch that is linked in my panel. So if I update it, any of those objects that have that same color will also update to a new color that I change it to. And you can tell that it's a global color because it has this little triangle that's white on the swatch. Now, before I change any of those to show you how that's done, I'll show you how to create a global swatch. So on my color panel, I have this color that I want to add to my swatches, and so I click on the drop down, go to create new swatch, and then make sure that this global is checked. If it's not, then it won't be added as a global color. So I have that checked, click OK, it gets added. You see it has a little triangle in the corner. So now for changing colors, in this design, maybe we have this sort of yellowish orange gold color happening, and maybe I want it to be more of a bluish green. So one of two ways. I can double click and open up that swatch, and I can manually change it to what I would like it to be. Click OK, and automatically it will update all of those objects that had that same fill applied to it. Another option would be to select my fill color, double click on the fill, open up this panel, and I can choose my color from here that I would like to use. Let's say let's get more of this sort of a greenish tint. Click OK. Then hold down Option or for a Mac or Alt on PC, and click the fill and drag it on top of the swatch that I want to change, and then that will change that color right there for you. Yes, Andrew.
So Nick, we've got a quick question that came in here. What does it mean? How would you define a global color?
So it really just means that it's a color that is linked to itself and to the objects that use that color. So as a quick example, if I have another shape out here, I'm going to just draw a square here, and I'm going to create a new swatch that's not a global color. Oops. So I'm going to uncheck that. This is just a regular swatch, and say I want to change this color because I don't like it anymore, or I don't necessarily like how it looks. I can change it here, and it will update my swatch in my swatches panel, but it does not update any objects that have that same fill. So it's not linked.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, let me move on to tip number 3, outline view. So I use outline view when I have a really complex design that has lots of layers, lots of shapes, and you can see this here has a lot of those being used, and it can be really hard to select layers that are underneath a bunch of other layers. And so let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see some more stuff. And so if I wanted to select this pattern, or even maybe this shape back here, or even these group items, it can be kind of hard to make sure that that's the item that I want to select. So if I go to outline view, which is right at the very top, it's Command Y or Control Y. It will show me an outlined view of all of my objects that are on my artboard. And if I hover over any of those lines, I can then now select any of those shapes or the text itself very easily, and not have to worry about what's underneath or on top of it. And then to get out of this view, again, just Command Y. Tip 4, offset path. So I use this a lot when I want to maybe have multiple outlines of an object that maybe are larger as they expand outward. And so if I were using, if I had a square, let me draw a square for you so you can see how that would look. It would be fairly easy to copy and paste that. So I'm going to copy and paste that in place, and then click and drag to increase the scale of it. And you can see as I do that, because this square has right angles and is proportion to itself, these spaces on each side are even. If I were to do that to this rectangle, so I'm going to copy and paste in place, and then click and drag to scale it up, you can see that the spaces on the top and bottom and sides are not even. So what you can do, let me get rid of these, is select your object and then go to Object, Path, Offset Path. And then you want to click on Preview. And as you can see, as I change this number, let's try 0.5, you can see that it will put ½ an inch around the top and the sides and the bottom of this shape. And so now I have even spaces all the way around. The other instance of this that I use a lot is if I download some icons from a stock site and they don't all come from the same artist, and some have different line thickness or weight, but I need them to all be the same. So you can see that these two are close to the same line weight, but this hand is larger, and because this was probably drawn with a stroke but then outlined, and now it's a solid shape and a fill, I don't have the option to change the stroke weight. So what I can do is I select the object and then go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and because this shape has thicker shapes on it, I want it to be smaller. So put in a minus, I'll just guess 0.05. Make sure you click on Preview. That might be, there we go. So 0.15, you see there's a smaller shape being created on top of there. Maybe that's the 0.25, so you can see 0.025, you can see, and that's even smaller right there. I think I like the 0.015. That looks pretty close to the same weight as the other ones. Click OK, and then Command X to cut, and I'm going to select this and move this out of the way, and then paste the shape that I just cut out of there. So you can see that it just made a smaller path of that same shape, and now these look closer to the same thickness. Any questions on that?
Yeah, we've got a few questions here. The first one is, did you design those icons?
No, I did not.
Okay, so where can people grab icons like that?
So we use Adobe stock mostly, I think. Here we also have an icon library for ELV. You can also go to like iStock. Any stock site really has options for you for icons.
Okay, so these ones are probably represented inside of the eLearning Brothers icon library. You guys can go and check those out, see if those are something that you'd be interested in grabbing.
Yes.
Another question here is, you mentioned that there was a preview. You could see a preview while you were shrinking the weight of that last icon. Can you demonstrate that again? Because I'm not sure we saw the preview.
Let me zoom in a little closer so you can see. So let's just pretend that on this trophy I wanted to make it a little bit thicker. So I select the object, go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and then as you click Preview, it will show you an outline of what the new path is going to be.
Okay, so we can see that inside of the current shape.
Or if I do positive number, it'll increase it, and so you see that my original shape is now inside the new one.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Great. Okay, let's move on to tip number 5, shape builder. So for most of my career, I've used the Pathfinder panel.
I'm sorry, one more question.
Yes.
What was the command to cut and paste the original shape?
So Command X to cut and Command V to paste.
Okay, and if you cut it, does it remove it essentially to a clipboard?
Yes.
But you could copy Control C.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
When combining or cutting out shapes, I used to usually use the Pathfinder panel, which is right here, to merge shapes together or to cut shapes out of other shapes. But the shape builder tool is a way that's a little bit easier to know exactly which shapes that overlap you want to add together or cut out. So you see I have just a bunch of ellipses here, and so I'm going to select all of them, and then Shift M will bring up this tool, or it's this icon right here. Shift M. And then you can see that as I hover over the different spaces these shapes make, it shows a little grid of the shape that's in that space. So if I wanted to merge these two together, I can just click from one, drag to the other, and you see a line drawing across, and the whole shape highlights. And then I let go of my mouse, and now they're merged all together as one shape. So let's just do a few of these. So I can click here, drag there, let go of my mouse, and now they're merged together. Same thing here. Maybe I want to do this with this one right there. And maybe we want to do the same thing for these two. Now, the same sort of idea goes along if you want to remove a piece as well. So you can, if I hover over this stroke right here and I hold down Option on the keyboard, you can see a minus sign, and then I can select just that path. And then I can click and let go, and now that's gone. Let me show you a couple more of those. Maybe we don't want this path here, and maybe we don't want this little piece here anymore, or here. So again, that's hold down Option, you get minus key, and then you can click there. Now the same thing goes for the whole entire shape. So if I don't want this here anymore, I can click and drag, and now that's cut out of there for you. Pretty straightforward, and can be a lot easier to use as a visual sort of aid than the Pathfinder panel. Move on to tip number 6, clipping masks. I use these every day, and essentially the mindset is to think of a shape that is being used as a frame to mask another shape or an image or a group of objects. So you can see I have this pattern here. It's just a bunch of trapezoids and triangles overlaid in layers on a solid rectangle. But I don't necessarily want all of these ragged edges to be displayed anywhere, and maybe I want to have the same pattern filled in this star shape. So first I'm going to select all these objects that I want to be masked, and I'm going to group them by Command G. So now they're all grouped together as one group. I'm going to click and drag my star shape over this. Go down a little bit here. And making sure that the object that you want to be your frame or your mask is on top of the items that you want to be masked or clipped out. So with my star selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and select my object underneath. So they're all selected now. And then shortcut is Command 7. We can go up to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And now that's going to put that whole entire shape in my star. Now, as I roll the mouse over this, you can see that the objects underneath that are in that star are still there. And if I double click into this, it will show me my grouped objects. And from here, I can move this around inside my clipping mask until I like what I see in the star. And then to release a clipping mask is Command Option 7, or you can go back up to Object, Clipping Mask, and Release. Let me show you that same sort of technique with this other shape. Maybe I want this to fill up about that much of the space. And again, with my frame or my mask object on top, select it first, then hold down Shift to select what's underneath. Command 7, and now it's masked. You can also mask an image. So I'm going to bring over this image that I have of myself, and let's say I want to put it in an ellipse. So I have my shape. I can get it how I want it to be, make it a little bit larger, maybe make it more of an oval shape. And then with my shape selected, that's on top. I hold down Shift to select the image underneath. So now they're both selected, and again, Command 7, and now it's masked. And then if I double click, I can go into that mask and I select the image. You can see that. And I can move this around. I can make it smaller. And then double click outside of that to go back to the main layer. Okay, move on to the next one, Opacity Mask. So Opacity Mask has the same sort of idea as Clipping Mask, except for Opacity Mask isn't so much a bounding frame. It is, but it also controls the opacity of the object that's being masked. And it only works in grayscale tones. So let me just show you first how this looks, and then I can show you the other options that go along with it. So I have this this box that has a gradient from white to black, and this is going to be my mask. And I have this wing that I want to be masked. And as I bring this over, and then I can click and drag over to select both objects together. And then in my transparency panel, you click on the drop down and then make opacity mask. And you can see that it goes from the black to almost transparent right here. So what that does, let me release that again so you can see, is that anywhere that is white is 100% opaque. So that is not transparent. And anywhere that is masked in the black goes more transparent. So it is 0% opaque. So it's kind of confusing, but after you play with it a few times, you can see what it does and what you have to do to get a look at what you want. Let me show you a little more complex option for this. So I have this vector that goes from white to gray to black in an array of options. I'm going to bring this to the front, or my top layer, by holding down Command Shift and then right bracket. That brings it to the very front, the top layer. And I'm going to move it over my wing to where it's mostly covered. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm going to click and drag over both to select. And then in my transparency panel, drop down, make opacity mask. Now you can see that it does have that same sort of frame property to where the edge of that shape is cutting off the wing right here. And then anywhere that had white fill, the wing is now opaque. And anywhere that had a black fill all the way to a variance of gray has a variety of transparencies being used in them. Yes, Andrew.
Hey, Nick, we've got a few questions on this one. The first one is, can you do this with a color object or only with grayscales?
That is a great question, and I was going to show that and I forgot. So let me release this and let me show you. So the opacity mask itself only works in grayscale tones. The items being masked can be any color that you want. So let me show you. So if I change this black fill to, let's say, oh, I don't know, maybe more of a red color. And then again, I drag this over my wing. I select them both, transparency panel, drop down, make opacity mask. It will only show the opacity of the object that's being masked from 0 to 100%. It does not show any color being used. So it will automatically convert your colors of your mask to whatever grayscale value it
okay, and what if the wing was red?
Yes, let me show you that. That would stay red. All right, so let's change this. Let me go into this object. All right, so these are different colors. Let me quickly change these. All right, so that's mostly red. So let me drag my object to the mask it's going to be, select them both, make opacity mask. So the wing is still red, it just now has transparencies being used as a gradient from our opacity mask. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. Another question is, what will happen if the wing is in the foreground and the box is in the background?
So whatever is in the foreground will be told to be the item that masks what's under it. So if I release this and I bring this box to the back, and then select both and then drop down and make opacity mask. You can see that now the wing is my mask shape and my box is now what is being masked through that.
Okay, I'm looking through some other questions on this topic. Does this only work on vector shapes? Can it work on photos as well?
Yes, it can.
Okay. And then if you wouldn't mind going back a few steps, or do you want to take more questions at the end?
Let's do more questions towards the end.
Okay, so we'll grab some of these other questions later on.
Okay. So moving on to tip 8, using the transform effect. There is a lot that can go into this, so I'm just going to show you a couple options of what it can do or why you would want to use it, and then you'll need to just try it out on your own to see what sort of other effects and options that you would get. So I have a line here. It's a stroke with white that is at 1 pixel width. So I select my stroke, and then to access the transform effect panel, go to effect, distort and transform, and then transform. Now for this specific example, it's a technique that I've used a lot just to create a line pattern fairly quickly to use in like a background something. So first I want to click on preview so that any of the properties that I change, I will see how they look. For copies, let's say I want to maybe have 25 copies made of this. And then I want to move each copy to the right horizontally by, let's say, that far apart. So now it takes my object or my line, and it's making 25 copies of it, and it's going to move it on the x-axis by 0.0833 inches. So if I have a larger artboard that I want to fill, maybe I want this to be like 100 copies, you can see it's very easy to adjust and change as needed. The same thing goes for moving it on the y-axis as well. So vertical, move it up and down. So to confirm, I'm going to click OK, and then now all of these copies are just an instance of this one line. So I can't actually select and move any of these lines around. I can still only move this one stroke. So if I click and drag it, you can see that it's moved, and it moves all of its copies with it. And if I want to adjust this stroke and maybe make it not quite as long, I can click and drag one of its endpoints, and all of its copies will do exactly as it does. Same if I move it up and down, left and right, as well as if I change the weight. Let's just give it 3 pixels, and you can see that they all increase. What's really handy about this is obviously it's a really fast way to make a lot of copies of the same thing that are accurately spaced apart exactly as you need them to be. I'm going to go back to the 1 pixel on here, and let's say I wanted to be able to edit each of these lines. I can go up to Object, Expand Appearance, and what that's going to do is apply the effect, the transform effect, to each line itself. So now they're each their own objects. So they are grouped together by default. So Shift Command G to ungroup them, and then now I can select and change, modify each stroke as I please. So I'm going to get rid of these, and let me show you some other options that can be done with this effect. So I have here, it's the letter A, obviously, from a font that I outlined, and I gave it a stroke only. So it's a white stroke, 1 pixel. So I select the A, go up to Effect, Distort and Transform. Transform, again, make sure to click on Preview. And maybe I'm not sure exactly what I'm going for, but I kind of want to experiment and explore and see what options I might have. So I'm just going to put in 25 copies for now, and maybe I want to play with the scale you see here. So I'm going to click and drag this slider. You can see that now it's it's going to scale everything horizontally. Same thing on vertical. If I click and drag this, you can see how things adjust and change. And so what the scale does is increases the scale that's being used upon each copy. So each copy gets larger and larger. You can also play with the angle. So if I click and drag this around, you can see that it adjusts each instance of this by the angle by each copy, as well as being scaled. So there are lots and lots and lots of options of ways to create patterns or just really nice effects or to make copies of objects. I would just take a few and open this up and just play with it to see what you get. Okay, so move on to tip number 9, layering, strokes, and fills using the appearance panel. When I found this out, it was like the happiest day of my life. So what I used to do a long time ago is if I wanted multiple colors of fills and strokes of one object, I would make a copy of each time and move it in my layers panel up and down and have to scale them larger and smaller, each one at a time. And it was kind of hard to manage all of them and align them perfectly how I wanted them. But in the appearance panel, as you see, I've open right here. This allows me to create as many fills and strokes as I want on one layer. On one object. So I have some text here that I outlined and converted to a compound path. It's just a little bit easier to manage if you do that, but you can apply the same sort of effects to a text layer. So I select my object. You can see that it has a white fill right here. You can see that, and then also right here you see that fill. Let's say that I want to add a stroke. So I click on the stroke here, and let's maybe choose this color, and let's maybe give it a stroke, maybe 4 pixels. And maybe I want to align the stroke to the outside of this object. So I click on Align to Outside. Now, let's say I want to add another layer of a stroke. What I do is click on Stroke right here, Add New Stroke. By default, it gives it the same properties as the one below it. So I'm going to change this color to maybe this orange, and you can see that it's on top of this stroke. So now it's being hidden. So if I click on this eye to hide the orange, you can see that one that was there first below it. And maybe I want to make this maybe 6 pixels. So these layers work the same as your layers panel, to where whatever's on top in this list will be on top of what you see. So I want to drag this orange one below here so that I can see all 3 layers. This is another thing that can be really complex if you want it to be. You can add lots and lots of strokes and fills and apply effects to each one, and also you can control the opacity of each one. And just as one example, if I maybe wanted to offset this stroke a little bit, I could go up to, so I select the stroke. Sorry, I need to highlight my object first. Now I select the stroke, go to Effect. I'm going to go back to Transform. This time I'm not going to make any copies, but I want to move it a little bit to the right and down a little bit. Then you can see that that effect applied itself only to that one stroke, not to all of its layers. And maybe I want to add one more stroke here. Let's change this color maybe to this bluish color. And maybe let's change it to maybe 10 pixels. Oops, sorry, you have to make sure that the object is highlighted first in order to add more strokes and fills. So we got blue, and maybe we go 10 pixels, and I'm going to drag this underneath the orange. And maybe I want this to have a blur. So with the blue stroke selected, I'm going to go to Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur, click on Preview, and maybe I want something like that. Click OK, and then you can see that that blur has been only applied to that one stroke itself. And if you twirl down the options here, you can see that with the stroke selected, it shows the effect that I have applied there. So if I want to go back and edit that, and maybe I don't want to be quite as blurry, I can click on it, open up the blur settings panel, change this to where I want it to be, and then click OK to confirm. Now it's just as easy to remove strokes and fills as well. So maybe I don't want this orange one here anymore, so I highlight it and click the trash can, or I can drag it to that right there, and now it's gone. So again, it's really easy to add strokes and fills, but it's really easy to also get really complex really fast. Okay, let's move on to tip number 10. The object blend feature can also create some really amazing effects, and again is a simple concept but can get really complex really fast. So to show you what this first actually does, I'm going to zoom into these two shapes. So these two squares, one's pink, one's orangish, and the blend tool takes your objects from start to finish, and it gives it a certain amount of steps to blend them to each other. So to show you, I'm going to select these two here, go to Object, Blend, and Make. So you see that it took my orange square, a starting point A, and it automatically made a blend of how it would look to transform it to my pink square. Now you have some options to choose how you want it to blend. So let me zoom in a little bit closer here. So you can see that it's a fairly even, nice, blurred blend. If I want to change that to a certain amount of steps instead, I select this and go up to Option, Blend, and then Blend Options. And by default, it does smooth color, which is what you see. I'm going to click on Preview, and then on this drop down, I'm going to change this to Specified Steps. And you can see that it converts the smooth to the amount of steps that it has there. So maybe I want to take this down to maybe only 10 steps. I'm going to click on 10, I'm going to click on Tab to convert it, and you can see that now it shows from my orange to pink 10 steps to transform it from point A to B. So some other options and variation on this same idea is I have an ellipse. You see here it's red, and one that's kind of an orangey color. For the blend, I'm going to select the two objects. And then go up to Object, Blend, and I'm going to blend options because I know that maybe for this one I only want it to be maybe 3 or 4 steps, just so I can see kind of how it looks. So I'm going to do 4, Oops. Did not do that. There we go. So, sorry. I forgot that you have to apply a blend first before you want to go into blend options. And a shortcut key for that is Option Command B on the keyboard, and that will make your blend for you. You can see that it's applying the blend options that I first showed before actually making the blend happen. So my 4 steps are there. Same sort of thing here. Object, blend, make. It's retaining what I used last. Maybe I want this one to be more smooth. So go into blend options, and I can change this to smooth. Hit OK. There you go. Some more complex options would be I have this little ellipse and this star, so I'm going to select them both. Let's go. So again, Option Command B makes the blend. Let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see that better. And again, that took the last setting used, and it goes from shape to shape, so ellipse to star, and from color to color, so this sort of pink to this sort of orange color. And if I want to change those settings, again, go to Object, Blend, Options, and maybe I want to have 25 steps here. You can see what it does with that. Oops. 25 steps. Pretty neat. Let me show you how it would look having your shapes offset. So select both shapes, Option Command B, and I want to change these settings to maybe be 100 steps. Let's see how that looks. Click on Preview. Maybe I feel like that's too many. Go down to like 75. Maybe I like that. And you can see that the star is on top because it has its shapes being on top of the ellipse. So if I were to double click to go into this, because now it's grouped together, click on the star, and I want to put this behind the ellipse in my layers. So Command Shift and then left bracket will put it in back. You can see now the ellipse is on top of the star. So you have options to play with shape and color, and it's front and back to create a lot of options for some really fun designs. So those are my 10 tips for today. As you can see, they're all pretty basic, but you can get into some really complex items. Andrew, do we have any other questions?
These have been great, and for the sake of time, we'll only take a few questions. And most of these questions are going to be about previous tips. Okay. So first of all, let's jump back to the one where you had the icons, and we were adjusting weight. Let me
Offset path. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So watching the offset paths. If an object like the mobile phone icon is adjusted, is the dot in the middle of the mobile icon also going to be proportionately adjusted? And if that's the case, are you at risk of losing that dot?
Yes, you are. Let me quickly show you that real quick, how that would look. So if I select the phone, and if I want it to be smaller, Object, Path, Offset Path, and I do a minus number, you can see that it gets smaller with the rest of the widths. And as I get even smaller, you can see that actually the outline of the phone disappears before the shape of the dot on the phone does. So yes, you run the risk of that happening as you get smaller and smaller.
Is there a way to avoid that?
No, there's not. You could ungroup these and change the path each edits its own object. That would be the way that I would do it probably.
Okay. Another question is on the next step. The next tip 5 was, do you have an example of when you would use this this tip?
Yes, so let me go to, let's see, which one was my outline view? So this design was actually created for a t-shirt that we made for a conference. And if you ever made artwork for t-shirts, you need to make sure that you have each color is cut out of all the other shapes so that you have one screen for each color. So this is where I would use that, or I could use that tool here. So if I know that I needed to cut maybe this orange, or maybe this orange here, let's do that first. Sorry, there's a few effects applied to some of these. Let me make sure that they're flattened shapes. Okay, so if I needed to maybe cut this orange out of this blue here, I select the 2 and then Shift M, or this item here, and then I can select each piece that needs to be cut out or merged together. So holding down Option, I can cut the orange out of that blue there.
So all you're doing is holding down Option
to subtract it. To add it together by default is a plus sign right there.
You holding it down?
No. By default, there's a plus sign. When
Oh,
Option
okay, okay.
A minus.
I see.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
Yes, let me go ahead and check these ones off here. Going to the layered strokes trick, do you know if you can export these to After Effects? Would the strokes be able to be animated separately, or does it export as a solid object?
You could bring in all your layers into After Effects. Depending on the effects that you have applied to your strokes and fills, may and probably won't come across exactly how you want them to. Like if you had a blur applied to a stroke, I don't think you would be able to retain the stroke quality in After Effects. I think it would be brought in probably as an image, but I have not tried that exactly, so it might work, but I would guess probably not.
Try this for yourself.
Yeah.
Last question that we'll take today talks about the compound path for multiple strokes and fills. So can you make a compound path for multiple strokes and fills? This came in on your 10th tip.
Yes, okay, so I didn't cover compound paths. Let me quickly show you something. So this is my text right here. I make a copy of it, and I'm going to outline it so it's not really a font anymore. It's just a solid object. And outline is Command-Shift-O. Right now, this is just a grouped. This is just a group of flat objects, and effects and strokes and things that are applied to groups don't react the exact same as they would if you were to make it a compound path, which what it's saying in Illustrator is that this is all one shape together. So if I double click to go into this group, I can move these around one at a time, and there's each object is by itself being treated as its own object. You can see that as they overlay the outline of each one. Now if I double click and go out of here, and then I select this and make this compound path, go up to Object, Compound Path Make, which is also Command 8. Now it sees it all as one object, not as a grouped object. So if I bring the fill back onto this so you can see it better, if I use the direct select tool, which is right here, which is also A on your keyboard. If this were in a group, I will be able to select just the L or just A by itself and move it. But now that it's compound path, as you see, I select it. It selects all these shapes together because it sees it as one group. So things that are effects and strokes that are applied to groups versus compound paths don't react the exact same way. So if you want to see something as one object, I would make it a compound path first.
All right, great, thank you, Nick. This is all the questions that we'll take at this time. You're welcome to continue the conversation though. Reach out to us. You can reach us at 801-796-2767. You can send an email to info@elearningbrothers.com. We always want to make sure that you're getting the best information you can out of these webinars. So send us an email, visit our website, give us a call. We'd love to chat. We also have loads of templates like Nick showed. We've got some icons in our icon library that are great. Nick and his team are constantly developing new templates. Nick, do you want to tell us really quick a little bit about styles? Those are something that you guys are working on right now.
Yes, so styles is a set of 32 templates that function the same between style and style. But what makes a style is its look and feel. So we have some styles that use maybe rounded corners and more of a green flat look, versus we have some that use like a stone pattern and it uses a lot of blue colors. And so whatever look you may be trying to find, our functionality across all of our templates for each style remains the same, so you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I want to have this template in this look, but I also want it in this one, but it's not in that same look because they all function the same way.
And you've made these all available in Storyline, is that right?
Yes.
And they're expanding to go to Captivate as well as Lectora.
Yes, we do have a few in all three tools. The most, like you said, we have 3 styles have some assets out in Storyline, and then just over the next month or two, we will have all 3 tools with all sorts of options.
That's awesome. So if you use any of those 3 tools in your e-learning, you'll definitely want to check out styles. You can see some of those and demo some of them already in our library. You can go to elearningbrothers.com and look those up under the template section. So hopefully all of this made sense. You didn't miss anything. I know some of you are still asking questions and wanting to see Nick repeat some of his stuff, but we are out of time. And like I said, we are going to send you a copy of this webinar later today, and you'll also be able to look it up anytime on our blog or on our YouTube page later in the week. So, please review it. Please feel free to share this and allow people to increase their Illustrator skills. Thanks again, Nick. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see everybody next time.
See ya.